Think Trinidad and Tobago is just about carnival and steel drums? You won't believe what I'm about to reveal. Wait until you find out about the country where musical instruments were literally banned by law, where there's a secret indigenous group most people don't know exists, and where one cultural practice became so powerful it helped abolish slavery across the entire Caribbean. These 15 facts will completely change how you see this twin island nation. Number 15. Steel drums were invented by rebellious teenagers who turned garbage into gold, and it was completely illegal. Here's something that'll blow your mind. The steel drum, now Trinidad and Tobago's national instrument, was created in the 1930s by lower-class teens using literal trash. Picture this: dustbin lids, biscuit tins, paint cans, anything metal they could find scattered around Port of Spain's poorest neighborhoods. But here's the kicker. During British colonial rule, steel drums were banned throughout Trinidad because the colonial government believed Africans would use drums to communicate secretly and create uprisings, with authorities prohibiting all unlicensed percussion instruments by legal ordinance. These kids weren't just making music, they were literally breaking the law every time they played. The irony? What started as an act of rebellion by poor teenagers became so culturally significant that in 1992, the steel pan became the national instrument of Trinidad and Tobago. Imagine being arrested for playing what's now your country's most celebrated cultural export. The transformation from criminal activity to national treasure took just 60 years. That's faster than most people's entire lifetimes. Number 14. There's an indigenous group called the Santa Rosa Carib community that 99% of tourists never hear about. You heard right. While everyone talks about Trinidad's African, Indian, and European influences, there's a thriving indigenous community that's been hiding in plain sight for over 500 years. The Santa Rosa Carib community lives in Araima, and they're not just surviving. They're actively preserving customs that predate Columbus by centuries. Here's what's mind-blowing. While most Caribbean islands saw their indigenous populations completely wiped out, these descendants of the original Kalinago people maintain their identity through Spanish colonization, British rule, and independence. They have their own chief, called a cacique, and practice traditional crafts like cassava bread making and indigenous pottery that you won't find anywhere else in the modern Caribbean. The scary part? Most Trinidadians don't even know they exist. When tourists visit Trinidad, they learn about every other cultural group except the ones who were there first. It's like discovering a time capsule in your own backyard. These people have been preserving pre-Columbian traditions while the rest of the world moved on, and they're doing it just 30 minutes from Port of Spain's bustling streets. Trinidad's carnival was so controversial that the British literally tried to legislate the fun out of it. Wait until you find out how extreme the colonial government got in trying to control carnival. The act prohibited public carrying of torches, drumming, blowing horns, and stick fighting, and established the official start of carnival as 6 o'clock in the morning on the Monday before Lent. But here's the really wild part. They didn't just ban the dangerous stuff. They banned torches because they were afraid people would burn down buildings. They banned drums because of the whole secret communication paranoia. And they even banned gathering in groups of 10 or more people with sticks. Picture trying to enforce that today. Imagine police officers with measuring sticks counting carnival revelers and confiscating bamboo poles. The most bizarre regulation? The 6 a.m. start time wasn't about safety, it was psychological warfare. The British figured if they forced people to wake up early enough, they'd be too tired to cause trouble. What they didn't count on was Trinidadians' legendary stamina. People just started the party even earlier, turning what used to be a day-long celebration into a 48-hour marathon that still exhausts visitors today. The attempt to control carnival didn't kill it. It made it stronger and more defiant than ever. The country has two completely different islands with totally opposite personalities, and most people only know one. Here's something that sounds unbelievable but is absolutely true. Trinidad and Tobago aren't just two islands, they're like two different countries sharing the same flag. Trinidad is the party island, industrial and bustling with 96% of the population, oil refineries, and non-stop carnival energy. But Tobago? It's so quiet and different it feels like you've entered an alternate dimension. Tobago has pristine beaches that make Barbados look crowded, rainforests where you can hear birds instead of traffic, and a pace of life so slow that Trinidad locals joke about Tobago time where everything happens an hour late. Here's the kicker. Many international visitors spend their entire vacation on one island and never cross the 20-mile channel to see the other. It's like visiting New York and never bothering to check out the Grand Canyon in the same country. The cultural difference is so extreme that Trinidadians vacation in Tobago when they want to escape their own hectic lifestyle. Imagine living on an island where the main export is energy and chaos, and having a sister island where the main export is tranquility and untouched nature. The contrast is so stark that locals say you haven't really experienced Trinidad and Tobago until you felt both the urban rush of Port of Spain and the absolute silence of Tobago's rainforest canopy. Trinidad has more bird species per square mile than anywhere else in the Western Hemisphere, including places 10 times larger. You heard right, this tiny Caribbean nation, smaller than Delaware, hosts over 470 bird species in just 1,980 square miles. That's one bird species for every 4.2 square miles, which makes it more biodiverse than Costa Rica, Brazil, or even Ecuador per unit area. Here's what's absolutely mind-blowing. You can wake up in Port of Spain, drive 2 hours, and spot species that exist nowhere else on Earth. The Asa Wright Nature Center alone has recorded 159 species in a single day. That's more varieties than most birdwatchers see in their entire lifetimes. But here's the crazy part that locals know, but tourists don't. Some of these birds are so rare that international scientists travel thousands of miles just to glimpse them, while Trinidadians see them in their backyards and don't think twice. The scarlet ibis, which is literally on their coat of arms, gathers in flocks of thousands at the Coroni swamp, creating what looks like a red carpet floating on water. Sounds unbelievable, but during peak season there are so many scarlet ibis that the mangrove trees look like they're on fire from a distance. This isn't just about numbers. It's about density of natural wonder that most countries can't match even with 50 times more land. The country produces some of the world's hottest peppers, but has a cultural taboo against crying from spicy food that would shock most tourists. Wait until you find out about Trinidad's scorpion pepper situation. The Trinidad Moruga scorpion pepper held the world record for spiciness until 2013, measuring over 2 million Scoville units. That's roughly 400 times hotter than Tabasco sauce, and hot enough to be used as a weapon. But here's the mind-bending cultural twist. In Trinidadian culture, showing that food is too spicy for you is considered deeply embarrassing, especially for men. Picture this, you're at a local doubles stand, you bite into what looks like a harmless breakfast sandwich and your mouth literally catches fire. Your eyes water, your nose runs, you're sweating bullets, but everyone around you is watching to see if you'll admit defeat. The cultural expectation is that you'll finish eating while pretending everything is perfectly fine. Locals have developed an almost superhuman tolerance through childhood conditioning. Parents deliberately feed children increasingly spicy food as a rite of passage. The result? 5-year-old Trinidadian kids can handle pepper heat that would hospitalize grown adults from other countries. Here's the really wild part. Restaurants don't even warn tourists about spice levels because locals assume everyone can handle the heat. You'll never see mild, medium, or hot labels. There's just normal and extra pepper, and their normal could strip paint. The social shame of not being able to handle local food is so intense that some tourists have powered through meals that caused actual physical pain rather than lose face in front of strangers. Number 9. Trinidad and Tobago has more McDonald's restaurants per capita than anywhere else in the Caribbean, but also has a local fast food culture so strong it's actually pushing out international chains. Here's something that'll surprise you. This tiny nation has embraced American fast food so enthusiastically that it has one McDonald's for every 32,000 people, a higher density than Jamaica, Barbados, or even Puerto Rico. But here's where it gets really interesting. Local fast food is so deeply ingrained in the culture that international chains have had to adapt or die. Doubles, a curried chickpea sandwich served on fried bread, costs about $1 Trinidad and Tobago dollar. That's around 15 cents US. And is available 24/7 from street vendors who've honestly turned fast food into an art form. These vendors set up at 4 in the morning for the early rush, serve office workers at lunch, and stay open until 2 in the morning for the party crowd. The quality and speed would shame most drive-thrus. Fresh, hot doubles in under 30 seconds, made to order with your preferred level of pepper sauce. Here's the kicker. KFC had to add doubles to their menu to compete with street vendors, and even McDonald's struggles against local establishments that can serve a full meal for less than the cost of a Big Mac. The most shocking part? Many Trinidadians consider international fast food chains to be expensive, slow, and honestly inferior to what they can get from a guy with a cart on the corner. We're talking about a culture where the local fast food is so efficient and beloved that billion-dollar corporations have to copy local recipes just to stay relevant. It's like the entire island collectively decided that their version of fast food was better than anything the rest of the world had to offer. And, well, they were right. Number 8. The country has a secret gender dynamic in higher education that's creating a social crisis nobody talks about. You won't believe this statistic: women make up over 67% of university graduates in Trinidad and Tobago, creating one of the most extreme gender gaps in higher education anywhere in the world. But here's the scary part that's creating social chaos. This imbalance is fundamentally changing dating and marriage patterns in ways that are tearing families apart. Picture this: highly educated women in their 30s who can't find men with equivalent education levels, leading to a generation of successful women who are single, not by choice but by statistical impossibility. The ripple effects are insane. Men are increasingly feeling emasculated in a culture that traditionally values male leadership, while women are delaying marriage and children because the dating pool keeps shrinking. Here's what makes it even more complicated. The same cultural expectations that push women toward education simultaneously discourage men from pursuing higher learning, creating a self-perpetuating cycle. Young men often drop out to work in the oil industry or other trades that offer immediate income, while women stay in school longer. The result? By age 30, you have women with master's degrees working as managers and lawyers, trying to date men who never finished high school. The social tension is so intense that it's affecting birth rates, family formation, and even political dynamics. Think about it. An entire generation of the most educated women in Caribbean history, but they're struggling to find partners who match their educational and economic status. It's like accidentally creating a social experiment that's redefining gender roles across an entire nation. Number 7. Trinidad invented a form of nonviolent protest that was so effective it helped end slavery across the entire Caribbean, and most people have never heard of it. Here's a piece of history that should be taught in every school, but somehow gets overlooked. On August 1, 1834, an unarmed group of mainly elderly ex-slaves addressed by the governor at Government House began chanting "Pas de 6 ans," point to 6 ans, which means not 6 years, no 6 years, drowning out the voice of the governor, with peaceful protests continuing until a resolution to abolish apprenticeship was passed. But here's what makes this story absolutely incredible. These weren't just random protests. This was a coordinated campaign of passive resistance that involved entire communities refusing to accept the British apprenticeship system, which was basically slavery with a different name. Picture this: thousands of people who had just been told they were free, but would have to work for their former masters for 6 more years without pay, and instead of violent rebellion, they chose organized chanting and peaceful resistance. The genius of their strategy was psychological warfare. They made it impossible for British officials to govern by simply refusing to cooperate. Government meetings became impossible because crowds would show up and chant until officials gave up and went home. The most powerful part? This wasn't just about Trinidad. The success of this non-violent resistance convinced British authorities that the apprenticeship system was unworkable across all their Caribbean colonies. One small island's peaceful protest movement literally changed the fate of enslaved people from Jamaica to Barbados to British Guiana. The crazy part is that this happened 100 years before Gandhi made non-violent resistance famous, and 130 years before Martin Luther King Jr. It's like discovering that the blueprint for peaceful social change was actually invented in the Caribbean, and honestly, nobody bothered to write it in the history books. Number 6. The islands sit on top of one of the world's largest natural asphalt deposits, creating a lake so bizarre that people literally walk on water, if water was made of tar. Wait until you find out about Pitch Lake. It's like something from another planet right here on Earth. This natural asphalt lake covers 100 acres and is 250 feet deep, making it the largest deposit of natural asphalt anywhere in the world. But here's where it gets absolutely wild. The surface is solid enough to walk on, but soft enough that if you stand in one spot too long, you'll slowly sink like quicksand. The temperature of the asphalt stays consistent year-round, and here's the mind-bending part: it's constantly regenerating itself from underground petroleum seepage. Scientists estimate that even with continuous mining for over 150 years, the lake has barely shrunk because it refills faster than they can extract from it. The local tourism industry has turned this geological freak show into an attraction where visitors can literally walk across a lake of tar. But here's what they don't tell you: sometimes the surface isn't as solid as it looks. Locals have stories of cars and equipment slowly disappearing into the pitch, swallowed up like the lake is some kind of prehistoric monster. The most surreal part? There are actual trees growing directly out of the asphalt, creating this post-apocalyptic landscape where nature and industry have merged into something that shouldn't exist. Fish and frogs live in the rainwater pools that form on the surface, creating micro-ecosystems floating on top of what's essentially liquid road material. It's like discovering that your backyard sits on top of a naturally occurring parking lot that's been bubbling up from the Earth's core for millions of years. Number 5. Trinidad and Tobago has the highest murder rate in the Caribbean, but also has neighborhoods where people don't lock their doors. And both facts are equally true depending on where you are. Here's something that sounds impossible but perfectly captures the complexity of these islands. The murder rate is around 35 per 100,000 people annually, making it one of the most dangerous countries in the Western Hemisphere statistically. But here's the part that'll mess with your head. There are entire communities, especially in Tobago and rural Trinidad, where violent crime is virtually non-existent and people live like it's 1950s small-town America. Picture this absolute contradiction. In Port of Spain, certain neighborhoods have military-style police checkpoints and residents install multiple security systems, while 20 miles away in Tobago, people leave their cars running while they shop and kids ride bicycles unsupervised until dark. The violence is incredibly concentrated. About 80% of murders happen in less than 10% of the territory, creating what locals call parallel universes within the same country. Here's what's really disturbing. The geographic dividing line between safe and dangerous can be as small as a single street. You can literally walk 3 blocks and go from a neighborhood where mothers push strollers at midnight to an area where police won't patrol after sunset. The most shocking part for visitors is that these dangerous areas often sit right next to major tourist attractions. The same Port of Spain that hosts massive carnival celebrations also has zones that locals themselves avoid. It's like living in a country where Switzerland and Honduras exist side by side, separated only by invisible boundaries that everyone knows but nobody talks about. This creates a bizarre psychological split where Trinidadians simultaneously live with extreme vigilance and complete relaxation, depending entirely on which zip code they're standing in at any given moment. Number 4. The country's Carnival Monday and Tuesday are so culturally important that the entire economy shuts down for 48 hours, including hospitals operating on skeleton crews and the stock market closing. You heard right? Trinidad and Tobago literally stops functioning as a modern society for 2 consecutive days every year, and nobody thinks this is strange. We're not talking about a holiday where some businesses close. We're talking about a complete economic standstill that would be considered a national emergency in any other country. Here's how extreme it gets. Banks close, government offices shut down, courts postpone trials, and even essential services like public transportation reduce operations to almost nothing. The Port of Spain General Hospital, which serves over 1 million people, operates with minimum staff while thousands of medical professionals join carnival bands instead of reporting to work. But here's the really wild part. This isn't considered irresponsible or unprofessional, it's expected. Employers who try to stay open during Carnival face social backlash and mass employee sick leave that would make it impossible to operate anyway. The economic impact is staggering. The country essentially sacrifices approximately $50 million in lost productivity every year, and considers it money well spent. Think about that. An entire nation collectively decides that partying is more important than making money for 48 consecutive hours. The most mind-blowing aspect? This tradition is so deeply ingrained that even foreign businesses operating in Trinidad have learned to plan their entire annual schedules around Carnival. International conference calls get rescheduled, product launches are moved, and global corporations adjust their quarterly reports because one small Caribbean nation has decided that cultural celebration trumps capitalism for 2 days every February. It's like watching an entire country choose happiness over productivity and somehow make it work economically. Number 3. Trinidad and Tobago produces more beauty queens per capita than any other country on Earth, and it's not even close. Here's a statistic that'll blow your mind. This nation of just 1.4 million people has produced more Miss World and Miss Universe winners per capita than countries with populations 100 times larger. Since 1954, they've crowned multiple Miss Universe winners and countless regional beauty queens, creating a success rate that defies mathematical probability. But here's where it gets really interesting. Beauty pageants aren't just entertainment here, they're a legitimate career path and cultural institution that shapes how the entire society thinks about success and representation. Picture this level of investment. Local communities pool money to send contestants to international competitions, businesses sponsor evening gown designers, and the entire country watches pageant finals like Americans watch the Super Bowl. The training is so intensive that beauty queens undergo months of preparation covering everything from public speaking to geopolitics to walking in heels on sand. Here's the secret sauce that other countries haven't figured out. Trinidad's multicultural heritage means their contestants can represent virtually any global beauty standard, while their carnival culture creates women who are comfortable performing under pressure and connecting with audiences. The most shocking part? Beauty pageant success has become such a cultural expectation that young women face enormous social pressure to compete, creating a pipeline of contestants that starts in elementary school and continues through university. We're talking about a society that has essentially systematized beauty and grace to the point where producing international beauty queens is as predictable as producing oil or natural gas. It's like they discovered a formula for manufacturing global glamour and decided to export it as a national specialty. Number 2. The Twin Islands have created their own unique version of English that's so distinct it's practically a separate language, and it's spreading across the Caribbean. Wait until you find out how linguistically revolutionary Trinidad and Tobago actually is. Trinidadian Creole English has evolved into something so unique that international linguists study it as a completely distinct dialect that follows its own grammatical rules, vocabulary, and sentence structures. But here's the really wild part. It's not just broken English or slang. This is a fully functional language system that can express concepts and emotions that standard English literally cannot capture. Words like tabanka, the painful longing you feel after a relationship ends, lime, hanging out with friends with no specific agenda, and mamagui, playfully deceiving someone, have no direct English translations because they describe cultural experiences that don't exist in other societies. Here's what's mind-blowing. This language is so expressive and culturally specific that other Caribbean nations are adopting Trinidadian phrases and expressions, essentially making Trinidad the linguistic trendsetter for the entire region. The grammar structure allows for emotional subtleties that formal English can't match, like using does to indicate habitual action, as in he does come here often, in ways that create meaning impossible in standard English. The most shocking part for visitors? Educated Trinidadians can switch between perfect Oxford English and deep Creole within the same sentence, depending on who they're talking to and what emotion they want to convey. It's like having a secret linguistic superpower that allows for multiple levels of communication simultaneously. Young people across the Caribbean now use Trinidadian expressions in their daily speech, making this small nation the unofficial language laboratory for an entire region of over 40 million people. Number 1. Trinidad and Tobago is the birthplace of the limbo dance, but the original version was a sacred funeral ritual that would be, honestly, completely unrecognizable to modern tourists. Here's the most shocking fact that'll totally change how you think about Caribbean culture. The limbo that tourists do at beach resorts and on cruise ships was actually a deeply spiritual ceremony, performed at funerals meant to help souls transition from the physical world to the afterlife. So picture this. Instead of a fun party game, the limbo was a solemn ritual where participants had to pass under a flaming bar while in a trance-like state, symbolizing the journey between life and death. The lower you could go, the closer you came to the spirit world, and only certain people in the community were spiritually prepared to perform it. Here's what's absolutely mind-blowing. The modern tourist version has completely inverted the original meaning. What was once about death and spiritual transition became all about celebration and physical achievement. The transformation happened so thoroughly that, honestly, most Trinidadians don't even know their most famous cultural export started as a funeral rite. But here's the really wild part. Some traditional communities still practice the original spiritual limbo in secret, maintaining the sacred version while the commercialized version spreads around the world. The contrast is really surreal. Millions of people have done the limbo at parties and resorts, thinking they're just taking part in a fun Caribbean tradition, when they're actually performing a watered-down version of an ancient death ritual. It's kind of like discovering that every time you played limbo at a birthday party, you were unknowingly reenacting a ceremony designed to communicate with dead ancestors. The fact that this spiritual practice transformed into global entertainment while maintaining its original form in hidden communities really shows how complex and layered Caribbean culture is. There's always another level of meaning beneath what tourists see on the surface. So, we've just discovered Trinidad and Tobago's most incredible secrets, from illegal musical revolutions to sacred dances turned party games, from tiny nations producing global beauty queens to protesters who changed Caribbean history through peaceful chanting. Which one shocked you the most? Have you ever experienced the cultural complexity of these twin islands firsthand? Make sure to subscribe for more hidden Caribbean secrets that'll completely change how you see the world's most misunderstood region.